In this video, I will explain how the fantasy genre is structured, and then I'll explain the different types of fantasy genres in said structure. If you do like videos like this, like, comment, subscribe. But just get into it already. Today's talking points. Now, like I said, there is a lot to go over. So today we're going to be going over what is fantasy, and then the two major umbrellas under that, and then we're going to be breaking that shit down. Fantasy is a very broad genre that breaks down to a myriad of other subgenres. They all overlap and crisscross over each other. They look like a spider web almost, and the freaking spider is fantasy itself, you know what I mean? And they're just wielding these different webs, and all of these different fantasies overlap. So, but I'm gonna try to structure it in the best way possible. Now, like I said, fantasy is a broad genre, so let's break it down a little bit into two main umbrellas. Now, I don't know if this is like the main consensus or whatever. This is just something I thought about while I was reading a novel recently, bro. I feel so well, I want to say I thought about it recently, but it's something I've been curating over a couple months in my brain. I don't know how this is how people view fiction as a whole. I don't know if I'm just reiterating bullshit that has already been said before, but let's just keep on going. There's two main umbrellas: high fantasy and then low fantasy. Now you might be like, what the hell are these two umbrellas? Now these two umbrellas literally cover all of fantasy, because they are literally the kids, the child of fantasy, you know what I mean? One is not better than the other, you know what I mean? They all went on their different path in their own different group. At the end of the day, they're still fantasy. Listen, now, what is high/low fantasy? It's kind of self-explanatory, but if you don't know already, high fantasy is a subgenre set in an entirely fictional or secondary world characterized by extensive world building, the prevalence of magic and supernatural elements, and epic quests where clear distinctions between good and evil drive the narrative. That doesn't mean to be the main narrative though. Also, that's just the main most narratives in, well, the novels I read, because, well, I do read some trash. But usually it's not really necessarily you could draw upon on from our life, you know what I mean? There isn't really anything relatable, less so to speak. These are usually people, these be the isekais, these be the xianxias. This is truly out of this world, bro. Like, nothing is relatable. This is probably have full-on magic. Magic is everywhere. Probably got a full-on magic system / power system up in that bitch. Probably ghosts, demon, ghouls, beings who could teleport, shoot fire out of their hands, you know what I mean? Low fantasy is a subgenre that takes place in a world closely resembling our own or grounded in reality, where magical elements are rare, subtle, or intrude unexpectedly, often blending the fantastical with the familiar everyday setting. ChatGPT kind of made my notes so perfect. Now I'm starting to understand why writers use it to edit their novels. I'm kidding, don't do that. Now, this is what I call the fantasy hierarchy. So let me establish what we have explained so far into a chart, so you'll be able to imagine it way better, you know what I mean? So it goes from fantasy, then high fantasy, then low fantasy, and then there's 4 others, 2 in each, low fantasy and high fantasy. Now I'm going to be explaining what those 2 are. Now, even when I explain each of these subgenres, the subgenre that I can explain in the low fantasy might appear in high fantasy, and vice versa. Like I said, it's a web, but I'm just showing you the more concrete, more definite ones from my experience of reading, at least the novels I read. Talking about novels, how can I forget Xianxia? And this is obviously starting off with high fantasy. We're gonna start off with high fantasy first. Xianxia. If you don't know what Xianxia is, Xianxia literally means immortal heroes. Is a Chinese fantasy genre that blends elements of Chinese mythology, Taoism, Buddhism, martial arts, and traditional folklore. Now, if you want to know more about cultivation, I have an old ass video explaining like a cultivation guide, but I have like a deep cultivation guide coming soon, but I think that might actually be an hour-long video. I yapped so much in that bitch, man. It's just too much value. I don't even know if I should release it. It might just be like releasing the grand archives. Like, that's like something that's like releasing the primordial scripture just out in the open. I might have to lock that behind a Patreon. Now, what are some of the main elements in Xianxia? Well, characters practice martial and mystical arts, often through meditation, alchemy, or qigong, or monk mode, I like to call it, to cultivate their inner qi, gradually unlocking supernatural powers and strive for immortality. Now, if you don't know what qigong is, I don't know how to pronounce it. I'm sorry, bro. I probably sound like Speed trying to pronounce the Chinese name. I like to call it monk mode. You know, these niggas be sitting in a cave for 5,000 years. They be doing crazy breathing techniques, bro. You ever seen those guys that be doing that? You know, like in those like inspirational, they be standing on top of a mountain doing all types of crazy moves. That's basically what monk mode is, but it can also be used in breathing techniques and shit like that. The stories are usually set in richly detailed, often ancient Chinese inspired worlds where magic is integral. Protagonist encounters gods, demons, and legendary creatures as they embark on epic quests and transformative adventures. And one key thing about Zhanjia is, beyond physical combat, these narratives emphasize spiritual development, self-discovery, and the eternal struggle between good and evil. Especially the eternal struggle between good and evil, bruh. Oh my god, bro. There's always the demonic versus the righteous in some capacity, or beasts versus humans, or invader, demon king versus humanity. Like, there's always a good versus evil. Every major arc in every single Chinese cultivation novel is good versus evil. God dang it, bro. Can we just have it where a guy just go around trolling everybody, bro? He just starts stealing everybody riches. He's so OP. Let's just steal everybody riches. Let's become the richest man in the world. Man, there's so many examples of this. If you just literally go through my channel, I talk about cultivation novels all the time, but some examples are Martial World, True Martial World, Boiling Dragon. Everything from I Eat Tomatoes is basically a cultivation novel. Everything from Arjun. I'm really just gonna recommend those guys, bro. Like, just read those guys. You'll understand cultivation, especially if you read an Arjun novel. Next up, hard fantasy. Hard fantasy is a subgenre of fantasy that emphasizes rigorous, logical world building in a well-defined magic system. In hard fantasy, magical elements are treated almost like scientific forces. They operate according to explicit rules, limitation, and consistent consequences, which help create a believable, internal, coherent world. Like I said, some of this shit overlap. You could also tie this into Zhanjia, because Zhanjia is also considered a hard fantasy. They literally have cultivation built into this bitch. Like, literally, the heaven governs everything. Chi is everywhere. The sun and moon are celestial bodies that are probably even guided through chi. Like, come on, bro. There's different realms, myriad of realms, like, hard fantasy. These be your isekais also. The demon king, he's in a world where there's magic. Oh my god, he's cultivating a magic core in his body. He got a rank ? Magic core. Holy moly. Like I said, cultivation is also like this. The isekais are like this. Unless the dude isekais and he become a farmer in his next life in another planet that is just like Earth, most likely he's gonna have some OP cheat in a magic world that makes him cultivate crazy crops. Now that we're done talking about high fantasy, let's talk about some low fantasy. Historical fantasy. Now, this is considered low fantasy because this is very grounded in our reality. This is like George Washington holding an AK. What if our founding fathers had machine guns? Wait, hold on. What if they had modern technology? You know what I mean? What if aliens came down to Earth back in 1800s and gave us crazy kooky bloodlines? They gave us secret technology, and then that's why we've been rapidly advancing. And then by 2040, something comes out that we've all been contacted with aliens, and that's why our technology has been rapping. And then people start to slowly become super meta humans like X-Men mutants. What if that was a novel? That's historical fantasy. Historical fantasy is a subgenre that blends the real historical settings, events, or figures with magical or supernatural elements, creating an imaginative reinterpretation of history. So think of it like Assassin's Creed. Like, you know what I mean? Bro fighting in the Cold War, like, you know, bro fighting the Brits, like, let me assassinate King George V. It combines the rich details and authenticity of historical fiction with fantastical elements like magic, mythical creatures, or alternative historical events. Authors use this genre to reinterpret or reimagine historical periods, often providing fresh perspectives on familiar eras by introducing elements that defy conventional historical explanations. Think of it like 5 from Black Ops 1 also, bro. You know how, bro, he had John F. Kennedy tell me something? These boys will not get in here. They will not get in here and slay America. Right, bro, running around with the M14. I'm sorry, bro. And then the last one is urban fantasy. Hell yeah. Now, urban fantasy is very broad also in a sense, but I like to say, think of it like Twilight, Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Very grounded. Sabrina, the Teenage Witch, you know what I mean? Like something that's like Wizard Waverly Place, like, you know what I mean? Like, it's not sunlight there, like... What am I talking about, bro? Urban fantasy is a subgenre of fantasy that takes place in a contemporary urban setting where magical and supernatural elements exist alongside the familiar aspects of modern life. The narrative is usually set in cities or metropolitan areas where the magical and mundane coexist, often with secret magical communities hidden within everyday worlds. So like I said, like Twilight, think of it like that, you know what I mean? Like these secret society that kind of something's wrong with me. It also implements fantastical creatures, magic, and supernatural phenomena into realistic contemporary backdrop, creating a dynamic interplay between the ordinary and the extraordinary. Like Supernatural also, till they start talking about hell and heaven. Maybe it started to become a little bit of a high fantasy, but... Wait, that was the end?